All right, welcome in to the Sports Renegades here on SportsTownChicago.com. I'm Ryan Stuprich.
And I'm Ryan Risky.
And, yes, we're back this week, and we're ready to go. And there's kind of a slow period in sports right now. You know, the NFL is done. Baseball hasn't started just yet. And especially in Chicago with the Bulls and Blackhawks struggling, it's kind of a dead area right now. But there's still a lot to talk about, especially with spring training.
Hey, it is technically the hot stove season now, as you're seeing a lot of trades and a lot of free agent signings are happening now.
Well, that's true, and there is a lot of stuff, especially in baseball, to talk about, and that's what we're going to start off the show with. The Cubs and White Sox both start spring. I think everybody does starts spring training games tomorrow, and I think that'll be exciting just to have baseball back. It seems like it wasn't that long of a break, too. And there also, you know, of course, hasn't been a lot of signings in the offseason necessarily. It's starting to get going now, and a big question is where Jake Arrieta will end up. I know the Phillies had made him some sort of an offer, and I think that's the only thing he has on the table right now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's not many suitors. Obviously, the Cubs are off the board now that Yu Darvish signed with the Cubs. You know, kind of bittersweet having to watch Arrieta go. You know, right now, eventually, you know, a contender might be able, you know, to come around at some point, or maybe Arrieta will have to settle. You know, Scott Boras isn't going to be happy about that, though.
No, I don't think he'd be happy. He's trying to get Jake Arrieta the best possible deal. And I mean, he's a good agent for the players. He's just kind of annoying to management and to the fans. Scott Boras is, but I mean, and then of course, obviously, the Cubs. You know, they went out a few weekends. I think that was about 2 weekends ago. They got Yu Darvish, and you know, I think we kind of figured, especially after the start of the new year, that Jake Arrieta wasn't coming back to the Cubs, and so they made an offer to Yu Darvish. I think and Theo said it's something early in the season that he didn't think was going to be possible, you know, earlier in the offseason, but he got it done, and luckily enough, Yu Darvish thought this would be a good fit, and it seems like a good fit for the Cubs. Kind of feels like the John Lester signing, where it just seems like it's going to work. And now you look at the Cubs rotation, and they really have probably top 2, top 3 rotation in all of baseball.
Right. I mean, they have obviously. It wasn't like they necessarily needed to sign Yu Darvish. It just makes them a lot better.
Yeah.
It gives them more depth, because now you see Mike Montgomery will probably be coming out of the bullpen, be the swingman / sixth starter. So, you know, before that, you probably didn't know who the sixth starter was going to be, or what other, you know, minor league signings they could have made to try to get depth, because they really didn't have much starting depth, and now they have a little more. And, you know, if everyone can stay healthy and John Lester can rebound, you know, his ERA was probably a little inflated by a pair or a couple of really horrendous outings. And
right.
There's, you know, and there's nothing you can do about that. You know, there was the Pittsburgh game. He gave up 10 runs in the first inning. Only 4 were earned. And then there's another game against the Reds. He allowed 7 runs in under 2 innings. I mean, and those are going to kill your ERA. And really, for a lot of the season, especially at the beginning when the rotation was struggling, Lester was the one guy you could count on to try to get them a quality start. True. Because that was when Arrieta was struggling to go 4 innings. Kyle Hendricks was injured.
And they hadn't had Quintana at that point. So.
Right, they didn't have Quintana, and like you had Eddie Butler in the rotation. Yeah, I mean, and really, I feel much better about the rotation going right now than I did probably last year, because, you know, you still had Lackey, and you had to assume that at some point he was going to decline.
And boy, did he ever. I mean, he was okay earlier in the year, but yeah, he definitely struggled, and we needed to shore up the back end of the rotation, which is why I think we both love the Tyler Chatwood signing. And of course, his ERA was inflated because of playing in Coors Field. His numbers away from Coors Field last year were really good. And
he pitches well against the Cubs.
Yeah, he seems to pitch. It seems like every time we go to like Colorado or the Rockies come here, it always seems like we're losing 2 out of 3 in that series. And
the last
kind of
two,
interesting.
Yeah, the last 2 times Chatwood pitched against the Cubs at Wrigley, he's allowed 1 run.
Wow. Yeah. So that's obviously a factor, of course, and I mean, obviously, you're kind of replacing John Lackey with Tyler Chatwood, so I think everybody likes that, and he's still young enough where he's entering his prime, and things should hopefully go up from here. And I mean, I guess I feel kind of bad for Mike Montgomery because, I mean, when he was starting in the few starts that he wasn't terrible, but I mean, he seems better in a long relief situation. Of course, he got the most important out in Cubs history in 2016. But I feel a little bad for him, but I like that he's taking this with stride. And I mean, when somebody's injured, because inevitably that's the nature of baseball, someone's going to get hurt eventually. Hopefully not for a long time. Then Mike Montgomery can slide in.
Absolutely, and I mean, as I said, it's just the depth. I mean, when you're not swapping out Mike Montgomery with Tyler Chatwood, you're swapping him out with Yu Darvish.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people, I couldn't believe the amount of backlash that you would see on Cubs Twitter. Every team has their bad parts of their own Twitter fan base.
Yeah, they do.
People are like, all they were complaining about was his World Series starts. And I'm like, that was
2 starts.
2 starts, and not only they just completely ignored that he had been dominating in the postseason before that, and then
right, he dominated the Cubs.
Right, he did, and then there was the report that he might have been tipping some of his pitches. That could have been a factor, and I mean, really, the pitching in that series wasn't all that great. It didn't look like either manager had a guy they could count on.
Right, and the Astros were the hot team that year, and they were hitting lights out last year. I mean, you had the MVP in Altuve, and you had Correa and Springer and Bregman. I mean, that's a really good young team that we're going to see for a long time. So, I mean, the fact that Darvish pitched bad, I mean, he didn't pitch well against a great team. So you have to look at that. And then also, there was talk. I remember when the World Series was going on, there was talk that the World Series baseballs were different. They were like more slick, and it was harder for pitchers to throw like a curveball. I think it was the curveball that a lot of the pitchers were complaining about. Apparently, they were different baseballs. I mean, that's not really an excuse, but it's something that the pitchers were talking about.
Right. I mean, we've been hearing all year. They're using different baseballs. Baseballs have been juiced. They're not storing them properly. That's why the increase in home runs and all that. And
yeah.
If it's true, I mean, it made it more exciting. When there's home runs and a lot of scoring is what interests everybody.
Yeah.
If you remember back when baseball had the strike back in 1994, and it took them a few years to try to win everyone back, and what kind of finally was the icing on the cake was the home run race between Sosa and McGwire.
Yeah.
Regardless if they were doing it the right way or not, the home runs were what got people back.
Yeah, well, of course, the home run's always exciting.
And obviously, there was a record number of players that hit 20-plus home runs. And I think it's a good thing for the game to see more home runs because I think that's what everyone likes to see. I personally like seeing home runs.
Yeah, I love seeing home runs too. I mean, that's always something that you want to see when you go and see a game live is you want to see a couple home runs.
Right. I mean, honestly, everyone, has their opinion on what kind of games they'd like to see, except some people might be I'd rather see the Cubs hit 3 home runs and lose 7-6 than win 7-5 and hit no home runs.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. So I mean, we'll see how it goes. It seems to be trending towards there's a lot more home runs in baseball. There's also a lot more strikeouts in baseball.
Right, and that's another thing. And then the strikeouts guys aren't, besides Anthony Rizzo and Joey Votto, guys aren't really choking up with 2 strikes anymore. They're still swinging for the fences.
Right,
and you really saw how valuable that was last year. I mean, Rizzo finished with more walks than strikeouts.
I mean. That's always like the best stat to see.
Well, that's the best stat when you're a guy that hits 30-plus home runs.
Yeah.
It's like if you're a guy that hits 7 and is a contact guy, it's impressive and all that, except for a big, strong power hitter with a long swing. That's really impressive. That's probably one of the most important stats on your stat line. And it's something really to value a lot because if you're walking 93 times and striking out 92 or something like that, or you're walking more and you're hitting 30-plus home runs in addition to batting 280, that's tremendous value because of all these guys that are striking out 150-plus times a year.
Yeah, for sure. And just to end on the Cubs rotation talk, the rotation, I mean, it's pretty much right up there. It's hard to beat Washington with the 1-2 punch of Scherzer and Strasburg. But after that, I mean, the Cubs have them beat with the back end of their rotation, and then you look at some other teams like the Dodgers with Kershaw, of course. That's always going to be up there when you have Kershaw. And, there's a lot of good rotations.
You kind of wonder if the Nationals might try to go in for Arrieta, because they have some guys that are going to be free agents at the end of this season. That includes Bryce Harper.
Seems like Harper probably won't be back because they wouldn't be able to afford him, but we'll see.
Right. I mean, it doesn't sound like, that they will be able to. Gio Gonzalez will also be a free agent, so they'll need another starter to come in, and that could end up being Arrieta. It depends if they want to spend the funds on it or not. Matt Wieters will also be a free agent at the end of the year. I mean, not that, they were thrilled with his production last year.
Yeah, and they're still a team that is probably going to win the NL East. I mean, I can't see any other team really stepping up and winning it, not the Phillies or Marlins or Mets.
I surely don't think it'll be the Marlins.
Or Atlanta. I don't think Atlanta's quite there yet, but they're an exciting young team. But, the Nationals are probably going to be in the playoffs again, and, that's going to be a lot of years in a row of going to the playoffs and they still haven't made it to the NLCS. And they probably should have last year, but the Cubs ended up winning that crazy Game 5.
Well, they should have each year they were in it, and then they came and blew it.
Yeah, they've had some crushing losses.
Or, Drew Storen blowing Game 5 against the Cardinals, or whether it was Matt Williams making some dumb pitching changes, or just blowing a game. And, the thing is, they were doing it against teams with experience that know how to win and that will come back. That's right. The Cardinals, the Giants, and the Cubs.
Yeah.
That they blew those games against. The Giants have won 3 World Series since 2010. The Cardinals seem like they were always in the NLCS before the Cubs took over the division.
Right.
The Cubs have made 3 straight NLCS appearances.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I think that's a good point there with the experience, and the Nationals have playoff experience, but they don't have the experience to move up around and to go to that next level. But maybe they'll be able to do it. I mean, of course, it's hard to beat Scherzer and Strasburg. If Strasburg stays healthy, that's still, that's a really good rotation. So it'll be tough to, it'll be interesting to see what Washington does. And, of course, the NL Central is a competitive race. We're going to take a break, and we'll talk about that competitive NL race, the NL Central race, which it's pretty much between the Cubs, Cardinals, and Brewers. The Brewers made some moves, and the Cardinals, of course, got Marcell Ozuna from the Marlins, as the Marlins were having their fire sale this offseason. So we'll talk about the NL Central race. We'll talk about the Cubs lineup, and then we'll move over to the White Sox. Coming up next on SportsTownChicago.com, Sports Renegades.